Professor Ola El Aguizy and her team of archaeologists are hard at work in a vast cemetery near Egypt's Great Pyramids. Though it's hot and dusty, the researchers are spurred on by the hope that they're about to discover something truly astonishing. And sure enough, they uncover the entrance of an elaborate tomb. The opening's decorated with puzzling symbols, but what can they mean? Experts uncovered an ancient Egyptian tomb, then noticed the strange markings on its entrance. It was back in October 2021 when the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities announced this outstanding discovery of an ancient tomb, the one unearthed by El Aguizy's team. The crypt's in a site called Saqqara, a vast necropolis that lies not far south of the modern Egyptian capital Cairo. El Aguizy's been researching this area and making a number of remarkable discoveries there since 2005. Of course, there was still much work to do in interpreting the symbols and wall paintings at the tomb entrance. The researchers had already reached some conclusions, though. In the October 2021 statement, Mustafa Waziri, Secretary-General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, revealed what researchers already knew about this crypt. The importance of discovering this tomb is due to the positions held by its owner, Waziri explained. He was a royal scribe, head of the treasury, chief overseer of the cattle, and also in charge of divine offerings at the temple of Ramses II in Thebes, in Upper Egypt. So this wasn't just any old burial, it was highly significant. And the ancient Egyptian's name was Ptahemwiya. Speaking to the Heritage Daily website, El Aguizy gave some more detail about the burial chamber. What has been discovered of the tomb is its entrance built of stone carved with reliefs showing the owner of the tomb, she said. The entrance leads to a hall whose walls have drawings painted and colored on a layer of plaster. El Aguizy continued, the mission has not finished its work yet because it has not yet opened the burial well, only the entrance has been discovered so far. It isn't possible to confirm the presence of a mummy inside the tomb until after it is opened. So, further intriguing details remain to be revealed. As we noted earlier, El Aguizy has been involved in excavations at the Saqqara necropolis since 2005. This sprawling site on the banks of the River Nile, some 20 miles upriver from Cairo, extends for 5 miles. Its most famous landmark is the Step Pyramid, constructed by the pharaoh Djoser some 4,700 years ago. Djoser's pyramid has particular significance as it marks the beginning of the practice of building such structures as tombs for ancient Egyptian leaders. Yet the real archaeological riches of the Saqqara site lie beneath the ground, in the many tombs of high officials from the ancient Egyptian era. Just like the one whose discovery was announced in October 2021. Over the years, archaeologists have discovered many tombs at the Saqqara site. They come from a period lasting some 3,000 years when this location was used as a necropolis. It first came to the attention of the modern world in 1850. That was thanks to the work of a Frenchman, Auguste Mariette, the Egyptian Antiquities Service's inaugural director. El Aguizy herself has been involved in some notable finds at Saqqara over the years. One of her most important discoveries, actually a rediscovery, came in 2010. The 3,300-year-old tomb of Thams, a senior military figure inscribed to 2 pharaohs, Ramses II and his father Seti I, had first been uncovered in 1885. But its location had then been lost, and it was a team led by Professor El Aguizy that had finally relocated it. Some of the artifacts discovered in Thams' tomb puzzled El Aguizy and her researchers, though. These were a series of shattered jars containing what was initially an unknown substance. But subsequent analysis showed that the contents of the containers were something rather surprising. Cheese. It was the first time ancient Egyptian cheese had ever been identified. In fact, this ancient cheese may have even more significance than being the oldest cheese in Egypt. Speaking to the BBC, Dr. Enrico Greco of Italy's University of Catania pointed out, the material analyzed is probably the most ancient archaeological solid residue of cheese ever found to date. In other words, this may be the oldest cheese in the world. A further key discovery at Saqqara by El Aguizy came a few years later in 2018. This was the tomb of another military man who'd served under Ramses II. Iria was interred in an extensive structure that included storerooms, a forecourt, and chapels. Another chamber, the statue room, featured several wall paintings. According to a statement issued in 2018 by Egypt's Antiquities Ministry, among these paintings is a portrayal of mooring boats taking down their loads of Canaanite wine jars. During ancient biblical times, those Canaanites resided in what's now Israel. And this commercial scene transporting wine offers a fascinating insight into life 3,300 years ago. Hieroglyphics in the crypt proclaim that Iria is a high army general and high steward of the domain of Amun and high steward of the estates of Ramses II in the domain of Amun. We know who Ramses II was, and Amun was one of the main Egyptian deities of this era. The Antiquities Ministry's statement also described another spectacular find related to Uriah's tomb. It revealed that a stone block discovered in the sand that was probably detached from the northern wall shows quite an exceptional scene of an infantry unit and charioteers crossing a waterway with crocodiles. It sounds like Uriah saw plenty of action during his lifetime. Saqqara has been the source of many spectacular finds for modern archaeologists, and perhaps the most bizarre is the Pet Cemetery. Extensively catalogued in 2015 and known as the Dog Catacomb, this burial ground lies near a temple dedicated to the god of death, Anubis. That sinister character was portrayed by the ancient Egyptians as having a human body combined with a jackal's head. Dating back to the 4th century BC, this extraordinary site contains the mummified remains of some 8 million animals. The vast majority of the creatures are or rather were dogs, though there's also a sprinkling of other species. These include everything from cats to mongooses, falcons, and foxes. The animals were an offering made by pilgrims visiting the temple of Anubis. But let's get back to the tomb that was discovered by El Aguizy during 2021. As we've seen, it was the grave of an important individual who'd been a royal scribe to Pharaoh Ramses II and a senior official in the royal treasury. And as we've also heard, the archaeologists already had a name for this man from the inscriptions at the mouth of the tomb. Tehemwiya. What do we know of Ramses II, the man Tehemwiya served, though? Born in about 1303 BC, Ramses reigned over Egypt for 66 years. During his long rule, the pharaoh embarked on massive building projects, erecting many impressive structures. In fact, according to National Geographic, he built more large-scale monuments than any other pharaoh. Ramses certainly had the time, since his was the second longest reign ever seen in ancient Egypt. One of Ramses' favorite occupations seems to have been commissioning gigantic statues of himself, which were to be seen all over his kingdom. This vanity may in part have been the result of his gilded childhood. By the age of 10, his father Seti I had already made him a captain in the Egyptian military. In truth, Ramses was only a third-generation royal. His grandfather Ramses I had been born a commoner but had seized power in Egypt by military means. Ramses II was only 14 when he became pharaoh and was immediately faced by the threat of invasion from the north by the Hittites. He defeated them in battle, but only just. Even so, wall paintings he later commissioned created the impression that he'd crushed the Hittites pretty much on his own. This misleading propaganda hid the fact that Ramses was eventually forced to agree to a peace accord with the Hittites. Despite this, though, he was undoubtedly a highly successful leader. After all, you can't stay on the throne for 66 without a great deal of political skill. And his glittering legacy was assured by the fact that after him, the next 9 pharaohs were all called Ramses. So, being one of Ramses II's right-hand men, as Tehemwiya was an extremely prestigious position in Egyptian society. Speaking to the art newspaper website, Campbell Price, Egypt and Sudan curator at Manchester Museum in England, confirmed the elevated status of a high official, such as Tehemwiya in royal circles. Given the important economic role of the temple, this would have been a prestigious function regulating the huge amounts of food that went in and out of the temple, Price explained. Hence why Tehemwiya could afford a fine tomb at this desirable part of the Saqqara necropolis. He went on to describe other evidence that confirms Tehemwiya's status. Tehemwiya was known from various architectural chunks from his tomb that had been seen at, or recorded as coming from, Saqqara in the 19th century, Price added. Also, a statue belonging to a man with his name and titles was found at Abydos in 1902. It's now in National Museums Scotland in Edinburgh, so we know he was an important chap. And as the art newspaper noted, once the hieroglyphs that adorned the entrance to the tomb had been deciphered by experts, Tehemwiya's duties were revealed. As well as being an important official in Ramses II's treasury, he was also a scribe for the pharaoh and in charge of the royal cattle. Some of the wall paintings in the tomb entrance depict men leading steers to a slaughterhouse. His tomb was built using bricks cast from mud and, typically for this era in Egypt, its layout mirrors that of a temple. Limestone columns at the tomb's entrance are inscribed with the various titles held by Tehemwiya. This entryway then opens into 2 courtyards that are decorated with murals. The wall paintings show a bull being ceremonially sacrificed and worshippers bearing offerings to the gods. One of the courtyards houses the shaft that leads down to Tehemwiya's burial chamber. At the time of writing, this is yet to be explored. 7 pillars in this courtyard are adorned with the jet icon, which references the underworld god Osiris. Talking to the Armenline website, Mustafa Waziri of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, whom we met earlier, emphasized the significance of the discovery of Tehemwia's tomb. It's important because it lies in an area that was already known to be a favored burial location for high officials during the New Kingdom period. Waziri cited the tomb of Hermab, which is near Tehemwia's grave. The former was an important military commander, much like Tehemwia. Other tombs close to Tehemwia's include that of the mayor of the ancient city of Memphis, once capital of the ancient Egyptian empire. He was called Ptah. So, this section of the Saqqara necropolis was obviously reserved for the high and mighty, often with strong royal connections. Just a few months after the announcement that Tehemwia's tomb had been identified, yet more stunning discoveries were made at Saqqara, not far from his burial place. And these predated Tehemwia by some 700 years. In March 2022, archaeologists announced that they'd found another 5 tombs of important pharaonic officials and local rulers. Like Tehemwia's grave complex, these tombs featured exquisite murals. The tombs date back some 4,000 years to the time of the 6th dynasty and the ensuing First Intermediate periods. The former ran from about 2323 to 2150 BC. The First Intermediate, also called the Dark Period, refers to the 120 years from the end of the 6th dynasty. During the 6th dynasty, Egypt was racked by drought, which led to serious instability, and then to the First Intermediate period, when the nation suffered societal collapse. Central government disappeared, and the country was divided into regions ruled by competing leaders. That's why this era is sometimes called the Dark Period. The 5 tombs are located near the pyramid dedicated to Pharaoh Mereneri, who ruled for around 11 years from about 2255 BC during the 6th dynasty period. The tomb hasn't been well preserved, and experts have even speculated that it was never actually completed. Some of those buried in the 5 tombs may have been subjects of Mereneri. Hieroglyphics carved into the stone of the tombs give indications of the identity of those who were interred there some 4,000 years ago. One tomb seems to have been the last resting place for someone called Iri. He was probably a senior official. Sadly, though, his sarcophagus, hewn from limestone, has been shattered and lies in pieces. The burial shaft in Iri's tomb leads down to a chamber with murals depicting scenes typical of an ancient Egyptian funeral. The wall paintings feature an offering table and a palace facade. Another tomb appears to have been for a woman who was married to a man called Yaret. A third might have housed an important priest called Pipi Nepheni. Of the remaining 2 tombs, one seems to have been for another religious official by the name of Peti. The hieroglyphs describe her as a priestess of the goddess of love, Hathor, and indicate that she was responsible for the pharaoh's beatification. The final grave contains someone called Hanu, perhaps a senior official at a royal palace. All of the 5 tombs include murals that are in an extraordinary state of preservation. Colors are still bright, and the objects portrayed are well defined. Subject matter in the wall paintings includes food, sacred animals, and various people, and the illustrations are decorated with intricate geometric patterns. Even after thousands of years, the skills of the artists who executed these works are readily apparent. Excavation and research continues at the site of the 5 tombs and elsewhere at the Saqqara necropolis. There's surely much incredible information still to be deciphered from the hieroglyphs adorning so many of the mysterious tombs. So there can be little doubt that the extensive necropolis will yield more fascinating finds in the years to come. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.